Yeah.
So I was hoping the first thing we could do is you could just tell us a little bit about Sound Rivers, a little bit about the event that you had with us, just so everybody can kind of have an idea of what you guys do and who you are.
Sure, absolutely. Sound Rivers is an environmental organization focused on water quality in about 24% of North Carolina, from central North Carolina to the coast. We work to advocate for clean water protections, to work with community partners on solutions to pollution. And we also provide education and outreach about the natural waterways that are in the Neuse and Tarr-Pamlico River basins that we serve. Our event was to celebrate our 40th anniversary.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. It was a wonderful opportunity for us to recognize the really long history that Sound Rivers has as one of the oldest grassroots organizations in the state. And what is interesting about our organization is actually a result of a merger of two organizations. The Neuse Riverkeeper Foundation and the Pamlico Tarr River Foundation merged in 2015. But both of those organizations were founded around the same time in 1980 and 1981. So we felt like 2021 was a great year to celebrate, 40 years of collective action from Sound Rivers and its predecessor organizations. And we did so with a documentary. We commissioned a local filmmaker to help us tell the story of not only Sound Rivers, but the rivers and the watersheds that we serve and the communities around them, to kind of tell the story of our founding, as well as the work that we're doing now and what is needed in the future. So obviously, our event changed direction a little bit due to a resurgence of COVID. We had hoped to be in person, and we reached out to Swell to help us make that event a success, even though we were watching from our living rooms rather than in a venue.
Yeah. See, thank you so much for explaining a little bit about who you are. I just heard you cover a little bit about what I was about to ask you.
Sorry.
No, it's perfect.
Once you get me going, I don't stop.
Yeah, no, perfect segue into it. If you could just tell a little bit about the challenges you were facing with this event, which you just touched on a little bit, and what solutions you were looking for when you were searching for a software provider. So, obviously you mentioned a little bit about COVID, but, some of those challenges, if it was pre-event fundraising, or if you were looking for some online donations to come in pre-event, during the event, whatever those challenges were, what were you looking for as a solution, with your software provider when you were searching for one?
Absolutely. What was so interesting is the main challenge, of course, that I mentioned before that we were facing was the resurgence of COVID-19, which changed our approach for the fall event to be virtual. And it's so interesting with events in 2021. There was often this opportunity where it was like maybe by the time we had the event it would be fine, but we couldn't know, so we had to make the choice to pivot virtual in the late summer. And we made that decision. The original concept for the events was that we would do several different events regionally so that we could reach our entire watersheds with the events, and no one would have to drive too far. And and they would be largely celebratory friend-raiser events. They weren't necessarily designed to be fundraising events. But when we pivoted virtually, we first of all had the opportunity to just have one event, because of course we don't have to have region-specific events if we can join from anywhere. But there was also a lot more cost associated with, and we hired a sort of virtual event coordinator, which recommended Swell. And that company just had a cost associated with that. And since we were also changing the timing of the event, pushing it back further to give us more time to plan, it fell in the middle of our fundraising season. And really, it was one of those things where, while we would have all preferred to gather in person, when we made that change virtually, we wanted to make sure that we were taking advantage of opportunities that going virtual presented us. So we were losing some opportunity for face-to-face interaction and that in-person celebration that we had all been so looking forward to, but it changed the ability for us to fundraise around it a little bit, to somewhat better capture people's interest in it, engage them in charitable giving. I just think it not having had an in-person event, that like having a virtual event made it very easy for people to give money while they were watching the documentary comfortably. We never wanted to charge for this event. We wanted for it to be free. And so we were planning to do that in person. So I digress a little bit, but so, the challenge, of course, mainly being that transition to virtual. We had a concept of this event. We had to kind of retool that concept. But, Swell was incredibly helpful and just very easy for our participants to view the event, to have a good time viewing the event, to interact with each other while viewing the event. And it also made it incredibly easy for us to not only ask for money, but have a great way for people to give, to support our organization, and to not only give, but to have that moment of the documentary. You hit that certain part that's very meaningful to you. There were lots of different parts, and there are people who are watching it, and that part that really hits them, like, that's my community, that's my town that was devastated by a hurricane, or yes, climate change is something I'm really concerned about. And so the minute that documentary made an impact on them, they had the opportunity to give while still watching that. And I think that was really helpful. So I can absolutely tell you that we raised a lot more money with Swell than we would have at our in-person events, just because that wasn't necessarily going to be our focus. And it was a really great opportunity to be able to incorporate our event into our fundraising plan.
Awesome. Yeah. Hearing you talk a little bit about it, I'm wondering if you have a piece of advice that you would give other nonprofits when it comes to going virtual. A lot of the time we run into, when we're talking to clients or potential clients or other nonprofits, they have a fear of doing that. It seems too difficult, or it seems like something they're not going to be able to accomplish. They're so used to having that in-person event. They know the way it runs. They're familiar with it. And so it's kind of stepping into this new unknown territory. And I'm wondering if you have any piece of advice, because you've been through it, you lived through it, and you did it successfully. What would you tell them about going virtual, or even in this kind of era right now would be like the hybrid situation where you have a little bit of both?
Right. Yeah, I think it's so interesting too, because, the necessities of the past 2 years made it, like we had to go virtual. And I don't know that certainly wouldn't have been our choice before that. But I think that, having been sort of directed in that decision by circumstances outside our control, it was a great opportunity for us to see how things could go, and that they could go very well. I mean, I think one of the things that is so hard event planning is, trying to figure out like what your audience is going to show up for. Not just in terms of like the content, but just in terms of like, okay, well, weeknights are bad for this group of people, but weekends are bad for this group of people, and like too soon after work is bad for this group of people, but too late is going to alienate this group of people. With virtual, I think it gave us a lot more flexibility to attract a lot larger of and a lot more broad cross-section of our supporters, because nobody had to travel anywhere. People could log on and log in from wherever they were comfortable. They also didn't necessarily have to stay for the entire time, and while we would love for them to, and most people did, if people had another pressing commitment or something, it wasn't like they had to skip our event entirely. Also, the opportunity for people who were not able to attend at the actual live version to see the recording again and to still be able to give through Swell, meant that our event had an impact even beyond what the initial day it was. So I think it kind of, instead of looking at virtual as like the necessary option in times of COVID, I think it's really interesting to look at it as a tool to expand your audience, to reach more people, to reach people who otherwise wouldn't be served by your event, who, for whatever reason, are not going to be able to attend in person. I think it really gives you an opportunity to reach more people.
Well, and it even sounded like in your case. Sorry, go ahead.
What? No,
Well, I was just going to say, it sounded like in your case, you were planning these events in multiple locations because
Mhm.
you didn't have everybody in the same area. And what made
Yes.
it really nice for you with the virtual is that you didn't have to have all these separate events. You were able to actually host everybody together in one place, which is really nice.
Absolutely. And, I've worked for two organizations, one recently, one was national and Sound Rivers is regional. And even being regional, it can be incredibly hard to get everybody in one place.
Mhm.
We have like the 2 hour, it can be, if we choose a place exactly in the middle, everybody's driving 2 hours,
Sure.
and you're certainly not going to do that for an evening event on a weeknight. And so, it tends to limit, it limits the size of our events, it limits who can attend. And so, yeah, we either have to usually do more events or just accept that, some audiences will not be reached. And so this made sure that geographically, that we could reach everyone. And the national organization I worked for, we had very few events just because, it required significant travel if
Sure.
supporters from across the country are coming in. So I imagine for organizations that are even in a larger city, but like especially for regional or national or statewide organizations, that, considering adding a virtual component or having a virtual event each year, would likely ensure that you reached more people and that you had a more inclusive experience for people who are supporting you but are in distant geographic locations.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. Well, we're so glad that you used virtual, obviously.
Yeah.
And we really loved what you did with it. I mean, honestly, it is so nice to see someone put a new spin on an event concept. And what we've been talking about a lot lately is clients right now seem to be trying to come up with a new event concept. They're kind
Mhm.
of in that situation where they went through the rut of COVID and they had to change their event up a little bit anyway. And so they're trying to find something fresh.
Mhm.
And what you did was so strong and powerful. Sometimes I think nonprofits can get lost in the fun idea, but they lose the fact that they need to be telling their story and what it really means. And so for you guys, you really hit that right on the nail on the head. I mean, you guys not only had the unique event concept, but you also had the ability to tell the story and make it compelling and make it a fundraiser. I mean, that's what you really did. I mean,
Yeah.
Brooke and I literally last week were talking about the difference between a party and a fundraiser. You have
Mhm.
the entertainment aspect, but you don't want to lose that fundraiser.
Yeah.
So you guys really incorporated it well.
Thanks.
Yeah, of
Thank
course.
you.
I'm hoping to pivot just a little bit. I
Sure.
was hoping to ask you, before using Swell, was Sound Rivers using any other fundraising software or a software provider? And if so, what would you say the main difference is with what you did use in the past and what Swell has?
Sure. Well, we certainly never used anything like Swell. Not anything that had the capabilities of Swell, which is wonderful. That Swell it was available to us. Currently, we use Bloomerang to manage our donors, our volunteers, our grants, etc. And that's very helpful. We pre Bloomerang were not on a cloud based service, and uh, since we are a regional organization, we have multiple offices. It's really important for us to be cloud-based or internet-based so that we can all be in the system, like getting
Yeah.
that information. We use that to process donations, which has eliminated a lot of data entry issues, which is great. I found that that incorporating small donations into Bloomerang was not at all difficult, and was really easy to navigate. Um, and the support, of course, when we were working with you at Swell was wonderful. It was wonderful to be able to get in touch with you or Brooke when I'm setting up our sort of processing system and just making
Sure.
sure that that's going okay. And if we ever had any issues, that was really great. So I would say that the service that Swell provides, while different than our other things that we have used, I mean, Swell is very unique. I wouldn't say that we've used anything like you before. The service was definitely, the customer service was above and beyond what I've experienced with other donation support systems. Something that's slightly similar, but like not really, is Octria. We've used that for our virtual auctions.
Mhm.
that we've had to take virtually. We typically do a large in-person auction in the fall at one of our events that's in person. And, you know, one of the things about that is we liked the virtual component of it so much that we're considering this year at least offering hybrid, if not going entirely virtual for the auction and just having it be sort of associated with our event, but not maybe actually at the event, because it takes a lot of manpower to get all of the auction things set up and like to the venue. So that's another system that we've used, and we've been happy with it. We certainly haven't tried to do anything very complicated with it. But the customer service is non-existent. I mean, it's fine.
Sure.
But it's not exactly on par with Swell. So
Thank you. You're really blowing my head up today. Just while we're talking about Swell software, I'm curious, and I know you used virtual, so I'm feeling like that's going to be your answer, but I would love to hear what your favorite feature was with using Swell, whether it was the registration or the giving or the virtual component, the support. I mean, I'd love to just hear what your favorite feature was and what really sold you. We are so interested to know what brings nonprofits in, what makes them want to use a fundraising software. And so what was it to you that really sold you, and what worked really well for you for your event with Swell?
Yeah, it was probably multiple components. So I will say, like, going into it, one of the reasons we chose Swell was obviously our partners over at Malone Media were familiar with you and recommended you. And it was a great fit between them and our event. And, you know, when considering what to do about the event and things like that, when we looked into Swell, Swell was the only thing I saw that had that we didn't have to build anything. It was already what we wanted, which was interactive component, ability to show our documentary with you know, with our hosts interacting with people, and opportunities to recognize sponsors, and opportunities to take donations very easily during the event. So it was kind of that whole package that I think was really important to us. But I mean, things that we were really excited about and made it so much easier and less stressful to run the event is what I mentioned before, the customer service, and the fact that I think you and I were emailing Savannah the week before the event, just being like, so what happens when it goes live? And you were like, I'll be around. And I'm like, sure, I hit the button that makes it go live, like just in case, you know. And these are things that, like, as a small shop where, you know, I am the department of development, it was really wonderful to have kind of that backup. That we don't often have with events, you know, where, you know, if it's a smaller event, or if it's an event where, you know, a lot of our staff are out or something, there's still somebody who's kind of carrying that mental load. So it was really great to have some partners in that mental load, I think.
Yeah. Hey, you guys are family. That's the way we see it. Yeah, we see it that way. You guys are family. We want you to succeed. So yeah, that's awesome. I would like to close us out with one final question. Sure. What piece of advice would you give to other environmental organizations, nonprofits that are planning their event, searching for fundraising software, trying to find something that's going to make them successful?
Oh, gotcha. Yeah. That's hard. Event-based fundraising is hard. You know, it's never been event-based fundraising. I will say, this is probably not what you want me to say. Hopefully you won't use this clip, but like, event-based fundraising is, has never been something that I've been particularly passionate about. It's like you said, I think a lot of times there's this sort of expectation that, like, you know, we're going to have a party, we're going to have fun. And I find that that event-based fundraising for me can be very difficult, because in order to get like a great fun party, you can lose that fundraising aspect of it. But of course, that's the success that, you know, I need to measure. So, so I've always found it very difficult to and very rewarding when you get it right, but I find it very difficult to combine those two well, especially for new events. It's
and
just
you're not the only one.
Stress. And there are some people who thrive there, and I absolutely, it's a piece of the fundraising puzzle, and I absolutely will use it in my toolbox. But it's always been one of the things that I've found most difficult, and again, most rewarding when you get right. But I think that my advice for that would just be to consider your audience very carefully as to what ways you can best communicate with them. If it's something where it's virtual, like our Swell event, we were fortunate that we had already kind of put a lot of planning into that documentary. But if we hadn't, and we had to plan a virtual event, I think it's something that we would have chosen just because it was a very forward-facing, engaging type of media and interaction with our audience, and something that our audience enjoys. We've done other documentary screenings, not our own, but like others. So we had kind of a track record of it. But it was that really wonderful sweet spot of telling our story. Like you mentioned, it was something that told our story. It was something that was engaging. It was something that was inspiring to people. It was something that people felt like was a recreational opportunity. It was something that they could do, and it was fun, and they could interact, and it inspired them to support our organization and keep it going. It was also something where, I certainly wouldn't recommend everyone do a documentary if it doesn't fit within,
Sure.
your priorities or your budget. But it is something that we continue to have and continue to use in sort of our fundraising capacity. So one of the things that I tend to look for with events or campaigns is like, what is sticking around? Like, what are we investing in that will have, continued effects or impacts in the future? And so this, I felt like we did well. We got it right this time.
You sure did.
Yeah. So it's difficult. I think my main thing was something that you touched on earlier, Savannah, and hopefully this is a better soundbite, but I think my main advice would just be, just keep your mission at the center of your mind whenever you're planning an event. That doesn't mean that it can't be fun, it can't be a party, but if you're constantly keeping your mission at the center of your mind and relating the event to your mission, it's always going to look really well tied into the rest of your organizational structure.
Yeah, you said it perfectly. Well, yeah, no, it was perfect. Thank you, Corinne, so much for jumping on here and being willing to share all of your information and all of your knowledge when it comes to the event space, the virtual events that you had. And congratulations on your success with your documentary event. It was wonderful, and we surely loved it. So we can't wait to see what you do next. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Savannah. It was great to chat.
Yes, have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much, Corinne.
You as well. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.